even experienced people in the industry, I always recommend to test with off-the-shelf or on-demand products.
Tell me a little bit about why, fulfillment is so important, what you guys do to make sure that you have like some decent delays. Maybe if you could tell us what are decent delays for, let's say, US, Europe, and so forth.
Right. Yeah. So something that's super important when you're picking a fulfillment company to work with is asking them the average delivery day time transit for each specific geo. So if you're shipping to any US geos, Europe, Australia, whatever, you have to ask them ahead of time to kind of have the marketing created around that. So if your landing page says you're going to receive your product in 3 to 5 days, but you're shipping to Australia and the average transit time is 8 to 10 days, that can kind of alleviate the back end of receiving a chargeback, et cetera. So I think something that's super important is to be really clear and candid in the beginning when you're onboarding with a fulfillment company and ask that ahead of time. In the US, it's usually not an issue. Same with Canada. But as soon as you get into the international shipping kind of zone, there can be a little bit of obstacles to overcome, but nothing that can't be fixed or avoided.
Okay. And how about like you were talking about Australia and kind of shipping in outside of the US? Do you guys like know which ingredients are able to be shipped? I mean, I'm going to give you an example. So like CBD or different types of, things that people are selling in the US are perfectly fine to be sold in the US, but then you ship it over to Australia and it's like, no, that's a banned substance. Like, can you guys help with stuff like that?
Yeah, so we kind of consult on that like right off the bat. So if you came to me and said, hey, I want to start a CBD tincture and I want to ship to here, here, and here, and Australia's on that list, like right away, our team will be like, you can do this and this, but you can't do that. So we kind of work with you and aid in some sort of consulting to kind of avoid that before it even becomes an issue. But in our pre-approved catalog, it kind of goes over, shipping and what ingredients are okay in certain places. Yeah. So a lot of these things are avoided. We've been around for so long, we kind of know how to preemptively avoid any kind of hiccups. But yeah, there shouldn't be any issues like that if you're communicating, obviously, with the right person to kind of avoid those kind of things.
Okay, well, that's a good thing. So obviously not all fulfillment companies are created equally, and having somebody who's going to be able to tell you the shipping practices. I mean, I've seen, some of our merchants that are with us, we do a lot of supplements, they ship 90% is US and then they have 10% just kind of all over the place. And most of the time, it's funny, like we've analyzed chargebacks, 50% of the chargeback comes from those 10% of sales, right? Because there's shipping issues, there's problems with customs and so forth. And Australia specifically, like, is the bane of my existence in terms of like shipping, because they just like everything gets stopped and so forth. And, we had a merchant like long time ago, a huge like nutraceutical merchant selling tea. And it's just like a very benign tea. And every order he was sending to Australia was getting stopped at customs because there was an ingredient. It was just like some chamomile or something, like really like a plant, nothing illegal. And that caused the demise of his business. Literally, it was like his chargebacks went out of control, didn't understand why, was not doing anything, malicious to cause this. And that happens. So guys, if don't auto assume that you're selling this in the US, it's all good that you can just take orders internationally. I always tell merchants, try to hone it in, test in the US, and then test other markets, right? So what are your best practices, or, for people who are looking to go global? Is there specific countries that you're like, oh, that usually works well outside of the US?
Yeah. So another thing to kind of touch up on what we were just talking about is if you're launching your offer on a network, ClickBank, Digistore, Buy Goods, et cetera, they usually have a list of countries that are recommended to not ship to, kind of like a green, red, yellow zone, good to ship, kind of iffy, and then definitely don't ship here. And then you can check and unselect what countries you do want to ship to and do not want to ship to. Some vendors are super set on selling to Australia, even though we know the customs can be a struggle. Okay. And what you can do is test it and then just switch it off once they're seeing that packages aren't arriving in a certain amount of time, which is something people don't really know, but just from being at the networks, it's kind of like a little hack that I still try to practice and teach to other people. But in terms of ingredients, anything in our catalog, specifically with ship offers, it's all pre-approved in the US. But then it's kind of, to take the next step if you want to ship internationally, kind of like look at the rules and laws before you launch the offer.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, the interesting thing, and obviously we didn't mention this at the beginning of the episode, is that, you work at Ship Offers and you're an expert in everything that comes with fulfillment and products and so forth, but you do have a history in the direct response space, right? You used to work, I think, at Digistore, if I'm not mistaken. So you understand also obviously the path of getting these offers live. So in your experience, why would somebody choose a proprietary blend versus something kind of like off the shelf? Is there like some kind of guide that you use to help people make that decision?
Absolutely. So for beginners or people who are just wanting to launch an offer, I see this a lot with affiliates who are like, oh, I see how, successful these vendors are. I want to launch my own offer. I even experienced people in the industry. I always recommend to test with off the shelf or on demand products because A, you're not floating cash. Like cash flow is not required for inventory. And then B, you can always switch the product. So if you're testing, I don't know, metabolism and it doesn't convert, you can switch to blood sugar and it's at no cost to you. All you have to do is change the label. Once you've tested a couple of products and you dial in the marketing, the copy, the landing pages, etc., you can then kind of hone in a little bit more and then do a custom formulation. But I don't recommend doing that until you've like tested. And then you kind of have some backbone to launch then a custom formula.
Okay. Well, a custom formulation. Yeah. I mean, I would guess you need a little bit of experience, but if you're selling well, just kind of an off the shelf product, is the natural progression to go to a custom formulation? Or do you see a lot of merchants just kind of stick in that realm of like, oh, these products work and we just continue?
In direct response, it's interesting because you see people wanting to launch one of each and just scale it and then move on to the next product. But I'm sure you've noticed this in the last few years, people wanting to transition into more of an e-commerce storefront and build longevity in their direct response businesses and offers. So you'll see people kind of launch, test, and then just keep it going because it works. Yeah. But for the people who want to build kind of a more long-term business, they'll then tweak the formula, throw in a little extra ingredients here and there that make it a little more distinguished than the other offers that you see that are just off the shelf formulas.
I mean, that's an interesting point that you mentioned is that people are going from the direct response model to the e-com model, which is obviously a little bit more sustainable in terms of, longevity. But there's also, you talk with a lot of businesses. So this is a little bit more of a business question. Is there something that you see that is a common trait in people or businesses that actually kind of stand the test of time?
Yeah, I think having amazing customer service and actually sticking to what you're saying in your marketing is just super crucial and important. And the direct response space specifically is so small that if you're not following through on your promises with affiliates, partners, or anyone that you're working with, your business is not going to last. So I'm seeing a shift in direct response, people just improving their business acumen to make it, more sustainable, but then also not just cheaping out on the products and cheaping out on the marketing. People are willing to invest a little bit more to make it last a little bit longer, which I think is it's been really fun to watch that happen in our industry.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is, a lot of people build these huge direct response businesses. And at least on my perspective, we see how people kind of transact their businesses. The businesses become almost like worthless, meaning it's not a sellable asset. So I have seen myself also like a trend of people trying to start like e-commerce fronts, so they can have like some kind of health store and so forth. But is there anything that somebody can do in direct response? You mentioned customer service, is a big one. But is there anything else that you can think of in direct response that can almost like legitimize the business and actually make it a real viable business?
Yeah, I think a couple things I've seen people do is add like apparel into their like upsell flows. That way the customers kind of attach to your logo, your marketing, it's in their hand, a t-shirt, a water bottle, things like this, or free like freebies in their order. If they spend more than this, they get like a free, I think Organifi did this, like a free frother for the greens or a free smoothie cup for protein, things like this that people have around the house that kind of attaches your brand to their everyday routine. Another thing I've seen is like inserts in packaging. So instead of just throwing 6 bottles in a cardboard box, doing custom kitting, making the box pretty, making it just very like color coordinated to your business. Little tweaks like this, adding stickers in there, just so that it doesn't seem like it's an Amazon box getting thrown on your porch. It's more of like some effort was put into it.
Hope you found today's session valuable. If you have any questions for me or just want to connect, please feel free to visit my website, mariasparagis.com. That's MariaSparagis.com. I'd love to hear what you're working on, so drop me a line on any hot button issues your business is experiencing. And remember, don't worry about failure. You only have to be right once.